Fun fact about the lead singer of Neon Trees, that is one of the first crushes I've ever had on a guy before I knew what that meant.
Fun fact, that also means that my brother is going to have a crush on their future ex-brother-in-law. Yes, Tyler Glenn is going to be my future ex-husband.
I don't like how you say things sometimes.
Welcome to Bible Boys, a podcast where two ex-evangelical siblings and an ex-Catholic non-sibling watch Christian media and either praise or condemn it. I'm Aaron.
I'm Josh.
I'm Michael.
This week, we tackle queer suicide in the Mormon Church with the 2018 documentary Believer. Before we argue about my taste in music, please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, like and comment on our video, and follow us on Twitter at The Bible Boys.
Now, I want to just come out in front and say that this little documentary covers one of what I believe me and Michael can agree, one of our favorite tropes in media in general, and it's a neat little straight guy. You gotta, as seen by our friendship with Aaron, we love a neat little straight man.
I like to keep like one or two neat little straight guys in my life circle. So like, you know, Aaron came in and then my brother came out and it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. A one-for-one exchange.
I used to be a straight ally before I became a gay enemy, and, you know, I'm really...
Yeah, incidentally, your homophobia increased with the gayness. Like, as you got gayer, your homophobia increased, and I really want to analyze that.
I saw what you guys were up to.
That's the thing. Once you're in a group, you can be like, oh, y'all are full of shit, huh?
Yeah, before I was watching the discourse going, all sides really here, I can understand where the gay community is coming from. Now I'm like, some of you guys are just straight up racist.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We've immediately gone off the rails. Aaron, tell us a little bit about this amazing band, Hans Zimmer's Imagine Dragons.
Yes. Arcane's stars of Netflix's Arcane's Imagine Dragons are, you know, one of my favorite bands. You know, I got really into them in 2012, 2013, which is about when they start, you know, getting famous, and just, I like them. I like simple lyrics that rhyme, and they do that, and I like that. And sometimes they do cool yells, and Imagine Dragons is great. But
I'm going to mock you very heavily throughout this entire thing, but I want to come out in front and say, this was my favorite band in middle school. Demons was like the number one song I've ever listened to, probably still, because I listened to it on repeat. I want that being said, that when I make fun of Imagine Dragons, it comes from a place of deep love.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, Demons does slap, so...
I just like, I'm going to be honest, I don't really listen to male artists unless they're Drake or, I'll listen to Kendrick Lamar, Harry Styles, and that might be it.
And this is why I'm homophobic.
Interesting selection you pulled, Michael.
You started with a not great one.
And Chance the Rapper. Look, you know what? Drake is a fuckboy, but he makes some good music.
Nope. Anyway.
Our musical taste aside, Imagine Dragons' lead singer is a Mormon named Dan Reynolds. And this documentary kind of goes through his own journey, you know, within Mormonism, how he became something of a gay ally within the church, and it kind of culminates in this concert, which is called Love Live, I believe. Love Loud. There we go. That happened in August of 2017. And, you know, it's just kind of a story about how he came about to put all this together. So I'm going to do a quick overview because it's really not that substantial. I mean, it's basically, you know, a guy threw a concert. But, like, I do think that there are some very interesting points in the documentary that we can actually have a, you know, fairly meaty conversation about. without further ado, we start with, these opening shots that are highlighting, both famous buildings in Provo, Utah, which is where the Mormon Church is based. Maybe it's Salt Lake City, actually. But either way, both of those cities feature heavily in this documentary. We see a lot of these really big, cool Mormon temples. And we hear statistics about queer suicide in the Mormon Church, and that's kind of framing this documentary. This is why Dan, put this whole thing on. And he talks about how he, doesn't feel the need to denounce Mormonism. And he's like doing this radio interview, and he kind of frames this whole thing as like, does he think he's going to change the church? And he's like, well, not really, but like he does want to, do something because, not saying anything is bad. We get some background into Reynolds' life. He's the seventh son of 9 children raised in the church. He actually did his, when he was 19, he did his mission to Omaha, Nebraska. But yeah.
That Nineveh of Omaha, those sinners that need to be reached in Omaha, Nebraska.
One of these days we'll get them.
When I think of Sin City, I think of Omaha.
They know what they do.
Listen, we had LDS missionaries at my college campus in fucking Terre Haute, Indiana. So, like, the Mormon Church has long arms and short arms.
Okay. Okay, so like I'm gonna derail us.
Hear you. This is what the audience is here for.
Yeah. So I have been watching a science fiction show called The Expanse.
I'm so curious how the fuck you're connecting these points.
So just wait, because one could even argue we could cover The Expanse, because there is a plot line about how the Mormons have made it to space, and they are doing space conversions and like getting ships and going out. And so when you're saying, yeah, they're in Terre Haute, Indiana, I'm like, a fucking course. They're on Mars. They're in the asteroid belt. They're everywhere. Like, I really found maybe the most believable thing about this piece of science fiction so far is that Mormons go to space in order to convert people. Like, I absolutely believe it. No questions asked. That's something I took and went, yep, that sounds right. And let's keep moving.
Listen, as this documentary says, a determined Mormon is a scary thing. But yeah, basically, then we get some, cuts of his life. Dan currently, at least at the time of the documentary, had, a 4-year-old daughter and 2 twin girls. And we meet Aja Volkman, who is his wife and is kind of the catalyst for him becoming an ally in the church, because she had a pair of, lesbian friends who, they were like, why are you marrying a Mormon? They don't, they were at this is, apparently they got married around the time that Prop 8 was being passed. And the Mormons were a huge force in, getting that passed. They donated a lot of money to, make sure that Prop 8 went through. And as a result of that, her 2 lesbian friends did not come to their wedding. And, Dan felt pretty bad about that. And, Aja also felt pretty bad about it. But like, that's what you got to do sometimes. And I think that frames it pretty well. At the same time, he was growing up and Imagine Dragons was starting to take off soon after. And at the same time, lead singer of the band Neon Trees, Tyler Glenn, was also becoming important in the music scene. And Tyler Glenn is also a Mormon, raised in the church. And he went to Omaha a little bit earlier than Dan did. So, they're both, it's a weird, coincidence that both of these people who were raised Mormon and went to the same mission area, both started pretty successful musical groups.
Fun fact about the lead singer of Neon Trees, that is one of the first crushes I've ever had on a guy before I knew what that meant.
Fun fact, that also means that my brother is going to have a crush on their future ex-brother-in-law. Yes, Tyler Glenn is going to be my future ex-husband.
I don't like how you say things sometimes.
Hey, Tyler, if you're listening, please come on the program. We'd love to have you.
Tyler,
consider that a formal proposal. In multiple ways.
If you're the lead singer of Neon Trees, Tyler Glenn, like, comment, and subscribe.
God. Anyway,
but only you, or if you look like him.
Anyway, So like, this was in 2014. He came out to his producer, who accepted him, and he was pretty happy about that. And he was, at first it was going great, but then he took a guy to the Temple Square in Salt Lake City, and he was talking about how he wanted to raise a kid in the church, and then like that week, essentially, the Mormon Church had this big leak of these orders that basically said that same-sex couples would be considered apostates. And so he was like, well, I have to leave the church now. And he did a whole album about being excommunicated, which we'll definitely want to flag, because even if we don't talk about it on Bible Boys, I think that's very interesting. We might have to dissect some of Mr. Glenn's controversial music videos, because apparently they, he's spitting on pictures of the prophets and stuff, which is, definitely going to stir up some conversation.
We could do a whole podcast on just controversial music videos, throwing a couple Lady Gagas in there and a couple Madonnas. That's after the cast.
It's not like I have a playlist on my phone saved for this very occasion. Only God can judge me, and he seems quite impressed.
Keep an ear out for future episodes. But basically, Dan Reynolds calls Tyler Glenn, and he's like, "Hey, I've been a shitty bystander. I haven't said anything, to bolster the queer community, even though I'm a pretty prominent Mormon, But I want us to come together and call on the church to change their policies of queer exclusion, basically. They want to come at it from this way of they want to not necessarily he has this conversation with his wife, which is very interesting, where he's like, well, you can't say we were going to enlighten the Mormons about this. We can't tell them, we're not going to educate them, because that's going to come off as abrasive and we're talking down to them, and that's not really. We don't want to come off like that, which is very interesting. We also get some interviews with John Dellin, who is a psych PhD, who was also Mormon, and he talked about the problem of queer suicide in the church. We see some really striking videos of Mormon propaganda, where they show this man Ricardo and this woman Jessica, who talk about how they Ricardo is gay, but he is married to a woman and he has many children. He's like, yeah, I am still attracted to, men, but I want to live my life, according to the church. And Jessica's like, yeah, I'm attracted to women, but I'm going to stay celibate because that's what my beliefs are. And then Dellin comes in and he's like, yeah, so mixed orientation marriages are a disaster and celibacy is actually terrible. It's horrible for your psyche. Suicidality and depression are just off the charts in the Mormon Church. And it's because of these kind of policies.
I do think it's important, like a little footnote here, that he came at this from wanting to see if it was effective, if these people could live happy lives. This was not I want to show how detrimental it is. He came from the other type of bias, at least from my understanding of what he was saying, of is this helping? And then he was like, it's super fucking not. Oh my God, this is bad. And I'm gonna do a whole TED talk about it. And can we please stop? And the Mormon Church was like, are you free? We need to have a little sit down.
Yeah, he gives this TED talk, and then 2 years later, he is excommunicated.
Which means he's, another slight footnote, excommunication for the Mormon Church means that not only are you removed from the church in this life, but you are removed from your family in the afterlife, which is in a religion, a sect of Christianity that is so focused on family. That's really rough.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of this, thank you, Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, for teaching me this lesson. When one is excommunicated, they're then only allowed entry in the lowest level of the afterlife, which is basically you've got your murders, your rapist, and your excommunicated people. So, you are in the same rung. The housewife who described it is I'm hanging out with Jeffrey Dahmer in the afterlife. That's how you're treated for being excommunicated, which is really fucked up in so many ways.
I want a fucking little cartoon of what are you in for? Well, triple homicide. What about you? One wild TED talk.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to listen to us talk about Mormon beliefs more, check out our episode on Latter Days featuring friend of the podcast Jeff Davis, who was also raised in the church. Jeff is really smart and has some really great insights about being Mormon. So check that out if you're interested. We also get some conversations with this place called Encircle House, where Dan goes to visit like this place that is like sheltering, giving some kind of positive area for queer like youth, like adolescents, teens. In I believe it's Provo. I truly don't know the difference between Provo and Salt Lake City. Sorry, but. Basically, he has these like very awkward conversations with a bunch of teens, and they're like I don't know if they're like, oh hell yeah, this is great, Imagine Dragons is here, or if they're like, this guy seems like a pretty big dork, but he's friendly.
I imagine
like,
it was
who
both.
the fuck is Imagine Dragons?
Yeah, if this came out like 2013, I imagine it'd be a ton of kids be like, fuck yeah, Imagine Dragons. I'm sure he walked in, they're like, oh my god, my uncle listens to you.
Yeah, my older sibling thinks you're great.
Yeah. Time moves so fast. I bet if I asked any of my students who Imagine Dragons were, like 5 of them would be like, yeah, kinda.
I seen them on TikTok. Yeah.
They made that cool Arcane show.
Yeah, exactly. They're in Arcane, like diegetically, they're actually literally it characters in Arcane. I can't let that pass. Anyway.
It's beautiful, and every artist who's ever done a song, like their song has been used for the opening of a show, should also be in the show.
Yes, I agree. But like in particular, we get this story of this girl Savannah, who like we see actual like cell phone camera footage of her coming out to her congregation and like being like, God loves me and made me intentionally, and just because I'm gay, that doesn't mean anything. I'm great. And then they cut her mic. We see them cut her mic, and then like a member of the state presidency is apparently there, like one of the important members of the church, and like they tell her to sit down. It's just like so brutal. I couldn't watch that part. It was awful.
Just a fucking PSA to all of our homophobic church listeners. Mm-hmm. Don't cut the mic, because then you're trending. And then suddenly, you got fucking Dan Reynolds of Imagine Dragons in your state calling your shit out. Every single time a church cuts the mic on an LGBTQ kid, Mike Reynolds gets his wings, and he's coming for you.
One of Aaron's bands goes to make a documentary about you.
NFT Linkin Park coming for you.
Don't. I can't. Mike Shinoda's into NFTs, and I'm not thrilled about it, frankly. Anyway... I believe Dan Reynolds gets a tour of the Trevor Project HQ, and they like give the stat that it's like 30%. There's a 30% decrease in suicide attempts with queer kids who have like one supportive adult, which is like, I wrote a whole essay about that, and similarly why the Catholic Church needs to reverse their own policies, because that's 30% of your 30% more lives you could be saving with this one neat trick. The church doesn't want you to know.
I know this trick.
Literally, yes.
So that we found our title of this episode: "One Neat Trick to Prevent Youth Suicides." Don't be an asshole.
I can't wait for YouTube to love that one.
Yeah. Anyway, we also get a really pretty heart-wrenching story of these two parents of this kid named Stockton, who unfortunately did die by suicide because he was not able to make any connections with his peers. And his parents bring out the point that like it wasn't really like him, like his friends all seemed to love him, but like being associated with him was so dangerous to them because of their parents' beliefs that eventually he became isolated and sad and depressed, and he died by suicide. And it was really sad. Yeah.
I will just want to say Aaron does this every time he does it, so I think it's only fair. I did cry during this point. I've had a very long and emotional day, and that was some of the saddest shit I've heard in a while. So I did tear up and got one good sob in, and then we were fine.
This was the first moment which I was filled with a white-hot righteous fury that could actually solve the climate crisis, because I could power the world for the rest of eternity. And fun fact, at this moment in the documentary, I started thinking, as a very notable and very loud and proud not atheist, I started thinking, should I rethink that?
Yeah, it's yeah.
I think we can have this conversation after we're done with the recap, but I think there is an interesting conversation we need to have about allyship and also like queer relationships with the church while being in the church, because there's a lot. This doc touches on it.
Yeah, I mean the next scene we get Dan Reynolds explaining like why even associate with Mormonism, and he says I'm not going to walk away and let the house on fire burn. This is the second time I cried because they are singing my favorite Imagine Dragons song, "It's Time," and they're singing like, "I'm just the same as I was. Won't you understand? I'm never changing who I am." And I just I was like, you got me." It's
never change, Aaron.
I cannot. I'm never changing who I
am. You just start sobbing.
Yeah.
Oh man, if you edit this podcast, be careful around that part.
Yeah. So they start to get this idea. August 26, 2017, in Provo, Utah. They're going to throw this Love Loud concert, and they start to do all the logistics, and immediately they run into problems. And here's the point where it's just like, oh, Dan Reynolds, you big doofus, because he was like, it's actually way harder than you'd think to get a pro-gay huge concert in Utah. It's like, yeah, dog.
I came out of this adoring Dan Reynolds while also thinking that he is a giant himbo. And just why can't people just like each other and be cool with the whole gay thing now? And I'm like, I don't ever stop being like this, Dan Reynolds, but oh my god.
Yeah. His naivete is endearing, I think.
Especially because you compare it to Tyler in the doc, who is so burnt by the church. And there's a quote on later after the whole thing, which we'll touch on when we get there after the event. But I think these two make an interesting pair, because you have Dan who's like, we can just fix it today. Today we could just have a giant concert and just show people how to be nice and it'll happen. And meanwhile, Tyler's like, this is a great display and this is awesome, but this is step 0.5.
Yeah. Well, it's we'll get into this deeper later, but I was just so taken aback at the difference between what an ally views the capabilities of progress are and what a person in the queer community views what progress looks like, right? So much of this is framed in a gay marriage view, and I've been noted on this pod and off to be like, that's really just not the central battle being fought. In fact, that was considered low-hanging fruit with the community, and we were like, this is going to be the easiest one to win because we can make arguments about family values and shit like that straight people eat up. And I was just stricken, especially at this point, of oh, Dan, you mean so well. But
he
talk
really
to
does.
Tyler for a minute.
Yeah. You can tell when he's pitching this idea to Tyler. Tyler's like, okay, yeah, man, this seems like a great idea. I'm not going to turn down a cool opportunity to work with you. But you can tell he's just like, oh, this poor man. He has no idea what he's getting into.
That conversation, I don't know if Michael, I know for a fact, has seen this. Aaron, I don't know if you've seen it, but sometimes a straight man loves the idea of gay people so much that they'll go to the first gay person they see and be like, what can I do? What can we do here? We've got this. I'm here for you, and I want to be your friend. And it had that energy. And I love when that happens. I've had a couple coworkers that I was one of the first gay people they've ever met, and they're like, but now I got one. I'm like, sure, bud. It just that entire phone call, I don't know. I came out of this really liking Dan Reynolds, not just because he really likes gay people and works so hard, but just he looked like a puppy sometimes.
He's a big golden retriever. What do you want?
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, they have a lot of difficulty, getting a place to hold the concert. They eventually secure this ballpark. There is a really sad moment when Dan's assistant, who is helping organize this this whole thing, his brother dies by suicide because he was going to Brigham Young, and he and his girlfriend had sex, and he told that to the school, and the school kicked him out for 5 years. And like, it coalesced his assistant's like will to continue doing the project, even though in the face of this tragedy, which was pretty, I don't want to say inspiring because it's just sad, but like it said a lot of his character that he's like, no, even in the face of this tragedy, I want to do this thing.
Oh, do you guys ever have the thought, because I did during this, where I'm like, which is going to hold my anger for school? I want to fist fight, and like liberty is always there. And then every once in a while I read a headline and I'm like, BYU, and then liberty, I'm just like, no, liberty's worse.
Liberty's closer to you all. We'll see what our West Coast audience can do about BYU.
Yeah, let's get a Twitter poll.
Yeah. Basically, everything basically ends up working out, except for the fact that like they'd only sold 8,500 out of 20,000 tickets, which is framed to be like a big problem. And I was like, man, Daniel, if 8,500 people came to anything I did, I'd lose my shit. But like basically I guess I don't know if he recruited them or the church reached out to them. It seemed like he was reaching out to them to make a statement. And he basically asked the local church to be like, hey, can you endorse this concert so that way people feel comfortable coming? And to everyone's surprise, they did. And they apparently sold out pretty soon afterwards. And they had a great concert. We see people doing these speeches. The cute little girl from earlier does a very nice speech. We get Stockton's family. They said how proud they think he would be of all this, which really hit me. And then we get what I thought was more interesting, which was the Mama Dragons, who I'm not sure if they are like a queer ally group or if they're just, older Imagine Dragons fans with kids. But they're like, this is a nice step, but the church needs to put their money where their mouth is. And, Tyler Glenn is like, yeah, this is a tiny step for the church. And, I'm a little bit salty about this because they need to change their policies. And unfortunately, at the General Conference, a month later, Elder Oaks invokes this family proclamation, and they double down on their anti-queer rhetoric. And poor Dan Reynolds is just so heartbroken over this because he's like, man, I really thought, that endorsement of my concert would mark a turning point. But of course it didn't. But they close it out with Love Loud will go on until it's no longer necessary. And, they say that all the proceeds go to like a bunch of queer charities. So that's nice.
I want to really give it to the doc because I thought it was going to end with the concert. I thought that would be it. And I think it is amazing that they didn't, because they could have. Mm-hmm. And it would have just been fine. But the fact that they were like, no, we didn't succeed. We didn't do what we wanted to do at the end of the day. We're still trying this. That again gave me more respect for the people that run this festival, because this, mm-hmm. and they literally end it with the kindest threat you can possibly have, which is we're not stopping.
Mm-hmm. I think that inclusion of the fact that they didn't, quote unquote, accomplish their mission does lend a lot of goodwill to the doc, because one of my criticisms of this which was like this does seem kind of performative. There are crews kind of following Reynolds around, while he's organizing this. We get him like the conversations that he's having with people on the phone. That's all filmed. So clearly this was intended to become the story of this great concert. And I think the fact that they're like, yeah, and then we didn't fucking win the fight. That does help a lot.
And also the fact that that could have been it. You know what I mean? He could have done that one cool concert, and would have called it, but he was like, actually, no, I'm going to try to, it's fucking me or the church. One of us will die first.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I respect the hell out of that. And I do just love the imagery of a ton of older women with Mama Dragon shirts marching behind Tyler from Neon Trees to take the Capitol. The Utah Capitol, of course.
Yeah, no. Utah's January 6th will look a lot different.
A lot fewer guns. I was also like stricken with something in the documentary that I find kind of true, and this is something that I often think about in the adaptability of, in particular, Christian religious groups. Mormonism has shown a very clear history of being able to change and adapt to the times that it's presented in. I think some of that has to do with the fact that it's just a younger religion in general. But, they pointed out about like ending polygamy, allowing Black people into the church, and like all these moments of adjustments. And we're seeing them kind of slow walk that with homosexuality and with their affirmation of queer people. And again, slow walk, right? Like, I'm not saying the Mormon Church was like, yay, we love Black people back in the 70s. They were like, oh, we are literally going to die as a religion. And I guess the reason that leaves me in a little bit more of a hopeful place is the religion that I was brought up in is kind of an unbullyable one, in that, Baptist churches are some of the most segregated in this country, right? Like, you have Black Baptist churches and white Baptist churches, and that's pretty much universal, right? Like, a lot of those scars still run deep. You have this lack of even a desire to moderate on LGBTQ issues. You have like this insistence on fighting the fight about things like abortion and conversion therapy, always on the wrong side. And you kind of have Mormons being like, how does that serve our message? And I find that to be at least a slightly more hopeful note than a lot of the like Baptist messages. Again, I'm not condoning or endorsing anything like that. I just find it to have a sliver of hope. Whereas, if Southern Baptists were the only form of Christianity, there would be just no hope in my mind.
Well, that's the thing with the Southern Baptist is if you don't like the church, you go make a different Baptist.
Yeah.
And you don't quite have that same experience with Mormonism. And I want to point out something very interesting with the doc, and that's Dan Reynolds tiptoeing about how things change in the church. Mm-hmm. Because he directly states that the only way things will change is if God tells the prophet. So what's the point of making a movement if you're not the prophet, you're not God. So the idea is that God has already told the prophet his opinions of LGBT rights. But Dan says if the entire church starts pestering, maybe he'll pray. Maybe he'll pray about it and things will change. And I'm like, this is insane because he's walking such a tight line between saying, like, I think this might not be exactly how things go, but without, like, directly saying it,
But that's the thing. I loved that bit because I was like, I think it's genuinely what he believes. Like, I don't think he was trying to be, like soft pedal it at all. I think he was like, well, maybe because if everybody's talking about it and generating this conversation, they'll pray about it and, they will come into a different interpretation of scripture. And like, I thought that was like, I just don't think the man has an ounce of guile in him. But like, it was a very interesting way to articulate that political position.
That moment stuck with me above most of them because it really highlights something I've seen moving a little bit with like ex-evangelicals where they're like, we need to stop trying to say that like religion doesn't have to inherently be anti-gay because it is. And I'm like, that's not going to help change things now. Mm-hmm. Like, I understand that like there are ways of reading the Bible that make it incredibly homophobic. But just throwing our hands up in the air and going, that's it. God hates gay people, and if you believe in him, you have to hate gay people, puts us back 50 years. And this reminded me that, and this kind of move into a different discussion, that I had a very short angry atheist phase before I moved into my and this reminded me why I'm happy I'm not there anymore, because it's good to see people doing good for the world through their religion. And watching this man go, like, I am doing this because this is what, like, Mormons should do, fight for gay rights. And I'm like, that makes me very happy. And I don't care how you get to that answer. If your spiritual beliefs do it, then fuck yeah.
Yeah, I think we should have that conversation because, like, the doc does bring it up. Like, what do we feel about the utility of, staying within an organization and fighting for change from within versus, just leaving? Because I feel like that came up a little bit when we talked about pray away, but yeah, like, I mean, Dan Reynolds' position is pretty clearly like, we're going to stay inside and try to work the system from within. But I find it, like, especially within the context of being a former Catholic, I find that a very difficult task.
I think this is one that probably all three of us were in at different points in our life, of looking at the toxic boyfriend that was organized religion and going, I can change him. I can make him better. And you can't while you're still suffering the abuse, in my opinion. I think that, like, while you are still directly being targeted and directly facing the repercussions, I think it's bad for your health. I think it's bad for your mental health and sometimes even physical health. If you're at a place in your life where you're safe and have, like, a good support structure and you want to change things, I think that's super noble, and I support people that do it. And, like, when I see, like, gay Christians, I'm like, I believe in you. I can't do that, though. I think that's such a personal thing of, like, I looked at my own, what I had going on, and I'm like, I can't take that on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel multiple ways about this, but I keep coming back to the very simple analogy here. I am a very progressive person that's a registered Democrat, so I do believe that sometimes you can change something from the inside, but being a registered Democrat does not dictate how I go about my day-to-day life or, do very much of anything other than gives me access to literally change a system internally by voting in closed primaries. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess, if that's your calling, then and that's your journey, Godspeed. I don't think that was ever going to work for me just because I'm personally just such a curious person and someone who's constantly, like, unsure about where I stand about the divine, right? Like, one of my best friends put it best, being a pantheistic agnostic. I don't know if I believe in God, but if God is real, they are in everything. And that's kind of how I feel, and that just doesn't really jive with organized religion, nor does it jive with changing a religious structure from the inside. I feel like you have to be kind of convicted of it, right? Like, I think I'm just a bit too much of a shrug emoji when it comes to religious beliefs to ever be a very, like, functional, productive member of the conversation.
Yeah, like, we all hope and people who are still in the religion pray that there are things will change. But I think when you brought up, the concept that, like, the Mormon Church changed its stance on civil rights because eventually they realized they would die out. And I think that is really, the thing that separates Mormonism from these other branches of Christianity is that they are just smaller. And they are also geographically, in a lot of ways, not 100%, of course, but at least in the United States, they are geographically located in one area. And that kind of limited scope really does, put you on, the fight of your life, right? You are, the Mormon Church is, a couple of generations away from extinction at any one point in time. And I guess that's probably true of most beliefs, but like, the point I'm trying to make is that there needs to be a threat before any of these entrenched power structures will change. And it is noble of Dan Reynolds to try to highlight, the danger that the Mormon Church is, putting queer people in. But I think that until the not just the Mormon Church, but all churches, see that there is an existential threat to opposing queer rights, the loss of their queer youth are going to be acceptable casualties, and that is a sad fact that I have not been convinced of otherwise.
Yeah, so I might end up being maybe on a more hopeful place here. I think we're kind of seeing a bit of that change. So at this same festival, the current governor, at the time lieutenant governor of Utah, Republican Spencer Cox, supported it. He was, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know that he attended it, but he like outright supported it. And back in 2016, he actually apologized for his role in homophobia in response to the Orlando nightclub shooting. He has this really strong quote here. How did you feel when you heard 49 people had been gunned down by a self-proclaimed terrorist? That's the easy question. Here's the hard one. Did that feeling change when you found out the shooting was at a gay bar at 2 a.m. in the morning? If that feeling changed, then we are doing something wrong. And he aimed that speech at, quote, the straight community. And this is a conservative Republican. Like, this guy and I probably agree on one issue and one issue alone, and that's that queer people are people and deserve equal rights. I don't know. I do think that there's some signs that the ground is moving, right? We're dealing with tectonic plates here. They move very slowly, and then all at once you're like, oh shit, what's that chasm? Oh shit, what's that volcano popping up out of the ground?
I don't think either of you guys are very wrong here. And I think my perspective from it is like, not to get too hammer and sickle, but I think a lot, like, you're not going to get a ton of movement until, for a lot of these churches, not all of them, there's going to be like a financial reason to need to change. And if it's more profitable to just, placate to the older audience that, doesn't really care, and they don't want to hear that they might have done something wrong, or, they don't want to hear that they're raising their kid incorrectly, or they don't want to hear that they need to change things, and they'll just shovel money into an organization that agrees with them. Until something like that changes, it's just not going to. And what gave me more hope was there was a quote in this doc where, I think it was at the Trevor Project, where they were like, some of these people just need to meet one nice gay guy, and literally it will change after that. And that's been my experience with a lot of people, is that like once someone they give a shit about is gay, or they meet someone and they begin caring about them and they find out they're gay, their opinions can change very quick. And it's fascinating to watch that. And that's what gives me hope, because there are a lot of people out there that will go from not caring about this issue to suddenly this is their issue, and they're like the Dan Reynolds of like, no, I'm going to stay out of this, to suddenly this is their personal crusade. And I respect the cool little straight guys out there fighting the good fight.
Yeah, do we have any other things we want to hit on about this doc?
A couple of small things. So one being that Tyler Glenn has officially like left the Mormon Church, and this happened in about 2015 when the church announced that the same-sex couples' children's couldn't be baptized. He actually resigned his membership and put out an album about it. Like, so that all is like covered, but I got to Googling about our boy Dan. And so he as of 2021, described himself as, quote, non-Mormon, and said that he's not really raising his children in any sort of religion, and that he's more focused on, like, spirituality and being a good person. So I kind of think even Dan has been worn down by some of the glacial pace at which everything is moving. And honestly, like, if you're an organization and you have someone that feels so passionately about something that would get more people in, you should be, like, sounding every alarm about this person leaving your church. I don't know, like, how many famous Mormons do we got that aren't named Mitt Romney?
Fewer and fewer every day.
How many likable Mormon, like, famous Mormon people are there?
Right, like, I don't know. I found that really interesting. Another thing that I looked up is, so in response to, like, this slew of suicides that have happened from queer Mormons, the church keeps donating, basically. So they donated $150,000 in 2018 to the state of Utah. They dated $25,000 to a queer advocacy group for queer Mormons, families, and friends to aid in world suicide training. And if that makes you feel warm and fuzzy, it shouldn't, because a whistleblower in 2020 said that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has about $100 billion in assets. They basically scrounged up some change from their couch and threw pennies at the problem. I find that to be maybe one of the most nefarious parts about it, is let's donate these funds that seem like they're high dollars, right? Because for me, $250,000 is a lot of fucking money, but if I were worth $100 billion, that's nothing. That's like, it's like if I gave someone $5. That would be like if I was like, hey, here's $5 for your troubles. It's like, oh.
It might actually proportionally be less.
Yeah. It really is a thank you, fuck you moment. Like, thanks, I'm taking your money, but also go fuck yourself.
It's kind of like if Michael put, like, a Starbucks gift card to the straight community. Like, it's it's not even kind of. It doesn't do anything. Yeah. I also want to point out that, like, I feel so strange about, like, the Church of the Latter-day Saints donating to, like, gay advocacy groups. It feels like Exxon, like, we promised to clean up the ocean. It's like, okay, who's doing it, though?
Yeah, like, it's like when BP ran all those ads, and it's like, look, we're cleaning all the oil off these ducks. Man, I hope no one asks how the oil got there. Oops!
We finally put the ocean fire out. Why'd it catch on fire?
It's naturally occurring fire. Don't you know, every couple hundred years the ocean just catches on fire?
We didn't sacrifice the proper number of goats to Neptune. It happens. Michael, is that all the small things?
I am not engaging with that comment. That is all of the information I had to share. I didn't have a whole lot. I feel like we covered a lot of the, Mormon Church's relationship with queer people in latter days. I do appreciate now we are 2 of 3 of us have picked something that is just queer and Mormon. And I'm waiting on us to get that perfect record in season 3.
I don't know if this counts as a me or Aaron pick.
I think it's a you pick. I was too embarrassed to bring up how much I like Imagine Dragons.
Yeah, I sent this to you. I was like, I don't know if you've heard of this, and you literally said, who the fuck do you think I am?
I'm just saying. How do we want to rate this?
I think I'm going to give this one radioactive. I want to watch those puppies, those puppets fight.
You're fighting puppies now.
The puppies are fighting the puppets. It's a weird music video.
I think I'll give this a 6 the first. That's 45 on the Pope list. Pretty good. Top 75%.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty great rating. I'm going to give this one feature from a future ex-husband because Tyler Glenn, I just want to, make that pitch one last time for you.
I'm so conflicted because if Michael is unstoppable, so if he's able to make this happen, that's huge for the cast. That's a big get. Like, we get him on this podcast, that's amazing. I don't want to deal with Michael in the same room as Tyler, though.
Why not?
Aaron, I'm the cast.
Well, when one of the siblings on the podcast is trying to avoid being in a room with the other sibling in the podcast, where can people find us on the internet?
I'm at Green History on Twitter.
I'm at Michael's Diamonds on Twitter, freshly blocked by at Green History on Twitter.
I don't want to see the tweets.
I'm at AaronSXL on Twitter, where I tweet about tabletop RPGs and health policy. I also do reviews of tabletop RPGs now for some reason. So if that's your thing, hit me up. I've got another podcast I do with my friend Layla. That's at Mortified Pod. We just covered the 2008 goth opera Repo the Genetic Opera, which both of us pretty soundly hated, but did have like a very fascinating discussion about. So if you like that kind of media analysis, check out Mortified. Well, we will potentially talk about one of my other favorite bands next week. That's hard to say, but if this music choice does make you cry, just remember that it is okay to cry, because even Jesus wept. We'll see you all next time.